He didn't ask for much. Just a table near the window, like he always used to sit at with his wife, before the cancer, before the surgeries, before the silence. Now he walked alone. The old man stepped into the Grayson, the kind of restaurant where the wine costs more than his monthly pension check. He didn't care. He wasn't here for the food. He wanted to see the memorial across the street, the one they built after the war, the one with the names. Some of those names used to call him Captain. The place smelled of dry-aged beef and money. Waiters glided between tables like dancers. Jazz murmured from hidden speakers. He adjusted his old army jacket, creases soft from decades of wear, medals long since removed. His cane tapped against the marble floor like a metronome as he made his way to the host stand. The two hostesses, maybe mid-20s, barely glanced up. One nudged the other, whispered something behind a hand. "Can I help you, sir?" the taller one asked, as if reading from a script. Her eyes didn't match the smile. He offered a nod. "Reservation for Collins. Table for one." She blinked, tapped a few keys on the screen. "No reservation under that name," she said, tone flat. "I booked it last week. I have the email if you want to see it." He reached into his jacket, slowly, like he always did now, like he'd been trained not to make sudden moves. He pulled out a folded paper, held it up. She didn't take it. Instead, a manager appeared, late 30s, clean-shaven chest puffed out like he owned the sidewalk outside. He placed himself between the veteran and the podium, voice all syrup and steel. "I'm afraid we have a dress code, sir. No military attire. And we do require jackets for gentlemen." "I am wearing a jacket," the old man said softly. The manager didn't smile. "I meant a blazer, sir. A sports coat. Not that." The veteran looked down at his jacket, the one that had once crawled through enemy fire, survived monsoons, and was folded beside his wife's bed when she died. He looked back up. "I'll wait," he said. A hush rolled over the front of the restaurant. The hostess shifted awkwardly. A businessman waiting behind him muttered something under his breath. But the veteran didn't move. He rested both hands on the cane and stared forward, unmoved. Behind him, the lunchtime crowd kept spilling in. Behind the glass, the memorial glimmered in the sunlight. And across town, the governor's motorcade was already on its way. Minutes passed. The dining room buzzed with laughter and clinking silverware, but at the entrance, the air was frozen stiff. Mr. Collins, quiet, still, unshakable, stood like a soldier on watch. His cane anchored him, but his presence unsettled the staff. It was as if the mere fact he refused to leave made them nervous. The manager whispered something to the hostess, who nodded and disappeared into the back. A busboy brushed past the veteran and gave a quick glance. More curious than cruel, but it stung all the same. A young couple walked in, greeted warmly, and seated immediately. Collins didn't say a word. He'd seen this look before, that subtle cocktail of discomfort and condescension. It happened more often these days, especially since the stroke. People saw the tremor in his hand, the droop in his right eye, the faded scars, and assumed things. That he was fragile, that he was slow, that he didn't belong. What they never saw was the jungle, or the desert, or the night raids where he had to lead men younger than these servers through hell and back with nothing but a map, a radio, and instinct. They didn't see the flag he folded and handed to a grieving mother. They didn't see the medals he kept in a drawer, not for the glory, but because the weight of what they represented was too heavy to keep out in the open. But still, here he was, disregarded, a complication, an inconvenience. The door swung open again. 2 men in suits walked in, clearly regulars. They fist-bumped the manager, laughed about a golf game, and were led right past Collins. One looked back briefly, confused. "Old guy okay?" he asked. The manager gave a tight smile. "He's just waiting on something." The suit shrugged and followed the hostess. The laughter resumed. Collins glanced at his watch. The governor was scheduled to speak at the memorial at 1 o'clock sharp. He wasn't early. He wasn't lost. He knew exactly what he was doing. And yet, nobody in this room had any idea who they were ignoring. The tension finally cracked when another customer approached the podium, a younger white man in a sleek navy suit, holding his phone in one hand and sunglasses in the other. He glanced at Collins like he was part of the furniture. Then he leaned in, half smiling. Is he with someone? The hostess shook her head, eyes flicking to the veteran like he was a problem she was trying not to make worse. The man smirked. Yeah, I figured. Can I take that window table instead? Looks like it's just sitting there. The window table. The one Collins had specifically reserved. The one facing the memorial. The hostess hesitated, caught between what was right and what was easy. The manager made the decision for her. Go ahead, he said. We need to keep things moving. Collins turned his head. Slowly, he watched the man saunter over, pull out the chair, and settle in like he owned the place. He ordered a drink before even sitting down fully. No one said a word. The manager didn't offer another table. The hostess avoided eye contact. A waiter walked by, eyes sliding right past him. It was as if Collins had become invisible. The injustice wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was casual, quiet, the kind that cuts deeper, because no one else seems to notice it's happening. Collins gripped his cane tighter, not in anger, in restraint. He had fought for this country, watched men die for it, lost hearing in his right ear, the feeling in half his leg, and the love of his life after a long fight she never asked for. And now, on the day he came to honor the ones who didn't make it back, he was being told, without a single word, that he didn't deserve a seat. Not even near the window. Not even in the back. Not even as a human being. He steadied his breath. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't beg. But inside, something started to shift. Because the governor wasn't just coming to speak. He was coming to meet someone. And that someone was still standing, cane in hand, right at the door. The shift from quiet dismissal to open humiliation came faster than anyone expected. Collins had stood for nearly 30 minutes. The tremble in his hand was more visible now, his cane bearing more weight as his leg began to tighten. The receptionist offered him nothing. Not a chair, not water, not dignity. Patrons came and went, most too caught up in their own lunch reservations and phone screens, to notice the man who had once led battalions now being treated like a trespasser. But humiliation doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it wears a smile. It came from the assistant manager this time. Young, eager, with a clipboard and the false confidence of someone who'd never been tested. Sir, she said, approaching Collins with a practiced grin, we've spoken with our staff, and unfortunately, we cannot accommodate you today. I have a reservation, he replied, voice even. I understand, but with the governor's visit and the special event, we're under strict capacity. We need to prioritize guests who meet the dress code and the atmosphere we're trying to preserve. There it was, not just rejection, but the suggestion that his very presence stained the room. The young hostess, emboldened, added under her breath, maybe try somewhere more like laid back? Another waiter, this one carrying a tray of sparkling water, snorted and muttered, guys probably just here to be seen. Bet that jacket's from a thrift store. That stung deeper than a bullet, not because it hurt his pride, but because it mocked something sacred. That jacket had been soaked in the sweat of 72-hour missions. It had dried in blood and dirt and tears. It had covered the body of a fallen brother once, when there was nothing else to use. And now a kid barely old enough to vote had laughed at it like it was a costume. Collins said nothing, but in his mind, he could hear her voice, his wife's, clear as ever. Stay still, Charles. Stillness speaks louder than shouting. So he stood, still, proud, tired, waiting. Behind the glass, down the block, sirens began to wail. Not emergency sirens, motorcade sirens. The ones that made every head in the room turn, and every heartbeat in the restaurant skipped in unison when the hostess gasped, "Wait, is that the governor's car?" The sleek black vehicles pulled up like shadows stretching across pavement, silent and precise. A pair of state troopers stepped out first, scanning the area with mechanical efficiency. One spoke into a radio clipped to his chest. The restaurant buzzed with sudden alertness, phones lifted, servers froze mid-step, and the manager all but sprinted to the door. The governor of the state, tall, composed, a war veteran himself, stepped from the second vehicle in a crisp gray suit. He paused at the sidewalk, flanked by security, and glanced up at the restaurant sign as if confirming something. Inside, the room held its breath. The manager smoothed his tie and yanked open the glass door. "Governor, we didn't expect you to." "I'm not dining," the governor said, eyes scanning past him. He was looking for someone. Collins hadn't moved. He stood a few feet back from the doorway, still holding his cane, still facing forward. The same calm stare, the same jacket. When the governor's eyes landed on him, something shifted. Not just recognition, reverence. The governor took a step forward, another. Then, with purposeful grace, he moved past the stunned manager and stood face to face with the man everyone else had ignored. And then, he saluted. A sharp, flawless salute. The kind you don't give lightly. The kind that demands the room's silence. "Captain Charles Collins," the governor said loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's been far too long." The entire restaurant went still. The businessman at the window table lowered his fork mid-bite. The assistant manager blinked, lips parting but no words forming. Collins returned the salute, slower but equally sharp. "Governor Hill, you're early." Hill smiled. "Couldn't make you stand there any longer, sir." He turned back to the restaurant. "Who denied this man a seat?" No one answered. But the silence was loud, the kind that clings to skin and memory. Because now, every person in that room knew exactly who they had just disrespected. And the governor wasn't finished speaking. The governor's tone changed. He no longer spoke as a politician, but as a soldier. As a man who had once stood in the same dirt, faced the same darkness, and owed his life to the kind of leadership no classroom or campaign could ever teach. "I served under this man," Governor Hill said, turning slowly to address the restaurant. "Back when I was 19, scared, green, dumb as hell, Captain Collins dragged my sorry ass out of a fire zone after my whole unit got ambushed in Kandahar." He let the silence settle before continuing. "Carried me half a mile with shrapnel in his leg and 2 bullets in his side. Never left a man behind, not once. And here you are, acting like he's not worth the cloth on your table." Mouths opened slightly across the room. The hostess's eyes welled with sudden shame. The manager looked like he was trying to melt into the floor. But the governor wasn't done. "I requested this location for today's meeting because Captain Collins asked to sit across from the memorial, not in a boardroom, not in a press room, here, because this is where his men are, where our men are, and he doesn't take that lightly." He turned to Collins again. "Sir, would you allow me the honor of dining with you?" Collins gave a small nod, eyes never wavering. The governor extended his hand, not as a politician, not for a photo op, but as a former soldier asking permission. Collins took it. His grip was firm, steady. And just like that, the balance of the room shifted. The same man they tried to push out was now being escorted to the very window table they denied him. But this time, he wasn't alone. And this time, every eye followed his steps, not out of suspicion, but out of awe. The same hostess who once looked through him now scrambled to pull out his chair. The manager offered a nervous apology Collins didn't acknowledge. And the young man in the navy suit at the window table? He stood without a word and stepped aside, suddenly unsure of everything he thought he knew about status and importance. Collins sat. The governor sat beside him. And for the first time that day, the room understood what respect really looked like. The governor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Power doesn't shout when it knows the room is already listening. Once he and Collins were seated, he turned toward the manager, who stood frozen near the hostess stand, face pale and posture unraveling. "I'll be filing a formal report with the Department of Veterans Affairs," the governor said calmly. "This establishment is listed as a preferred partner in the Veteran Welcome Network. Clearly, that listing needs to be reconsidered." The manager opened his mouth to protest, but words failed him. What could he say? That the man he dismissed as beneath their standards had once commanded hundreds? That the man whose jacket he mocked was the reason the governor was alive to speak? Behind him, the assistant manager took a shaky step back, suddenly aware that her offhand comment about atmosphere might make her famous in all the wrong ways. "You all had a chance," the governor added, voice steady, "to show decency, gratitude, humanity. You failed." He waved over his security detail and quietly instructed them to contact the restaurant's corporate office. At the same time, several customers, moved by the unfolding scene, began recording. Some uploaded clips of the governor's salute, the moment he called Collins captain, and the now deafening silence that followed. Within minutes, the videos began to spread online. #salute to Collins. #respect our veterans. #he saved the governor. Those hashtags flooded local feeds within the hour, and with them came outrage. Reviews tanked, calls poured in. By the end of the day, the Grayson had gone from a 5-star destination to a cautionary tale. But that was just the public response. The real consequence, the one that would haunt the staff long after the camera stopped, was watching two men, forged in war and bonded by sacrifice, sit in perfect peace at the window table they'd once deemed too good for him. A seat they turned into a stage. And now, the whole world was watching. As lunch went on, the energy inside the restaurant shifted completely. The noise returned, but it was different now. Softer, more careful, as if everyone knew they were in the presence of something sacred. The governor and Captain Collins spoke quietly over their meals, their words private, but their body language told its own story. They weren't just reminiscing, they were honoring, remembering, healing. Outside the window, the memorial gleamed in the midday light. A small crowd had gathered near the sidewalk, drawn by the motorcade and the whispers spreading online. Some carried small flags. Others just stood in silence, hands over hearts. Inside, no one dared interrupt them again. The manager eventually approached the table, wringing his hands like a man facing a firing squad. "Captain Collins, Governor Hill, I just wanted to say..." Collins raised a hand gently, stopping him. "No need," he said. He didn't say it with bitterness. There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet authority, the kind that makes you realize forgiveness isn't owed, and grace isn't weakness. The manager bowed his head and walked away. Meanwhile, a local reporter, alerted by the social media storm, asked to photograph the moment through the window. Collins agreed on one condition, that they include the memorial in the background. It wasn't about him. It never was. By the time dessert arrived, the restaurant had offered to comp the meal, extend a VIP membership, even rename a dish after him. Collins refused it all. He didn't come for praise. He came to remember the boys who never got to sit at a table again. That was justice enough. Because now, the people who tried to make him invisible couldn't unsee him. And neither could the rest of the world. As the governor's security began to quietly prepare for departure, Captain Collins took one final sip of water and turned his gaze back to the memorial outside. He studied each line etched into the stone like he was reading names from a family photo. Names he carried in his chest like folded letters, still sealed, still heavy. The governor followed his gaze. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Collins finally broke the silence. "Every year I come back here. Same day, same table. My wife used to sit across from me and read the names out loud, like a prayer. She said if I couldn't speak about them, someone should." He paused, voice catching for the first time. She's been gone 3 years now, but I kept the reservation." The governor placed a hand on his shoulder. "You kept a promise." Collins gave a soft nod, lips pressed into a thin line. People forget, not just who we were, but what we carried home, the ones who didn't. That's why I sit there, so the names don't vanish. From behind, one of the servers approached quietly. Her demeanor changed. No clipboard, no arrogance, just a small to-go box in her hand. She held it out. "I packed a slice of the cherry pie," she said, eyes lowered. "The one your wife always ordered. I saw the note in the reservation. I didn't read it at first." Collins accepted it, eyes softening. "Thank you," he said simply. She nodded, then stepped away. It wasn't about the pie. It was about finally being seen. Seen not as a disruption, not as an old man in a wrinkled jacket, but as a living archive of sacrifice, memory, and love. And just like that, what began as another quiet ritual of grief became something louder, something undeniable. A city remembered, a name honored, a man redeemed without ever needing to raise his voice. As Captain Collins stepped out of the restaurant, cane tapping softly against the sidewalk, the governor walked beside him, not in front, not behind, but shoulder to shoulder. Across the street, the memorial shimmered under the late afternoon sun, names casting long shadows over polished granite. A small crowd had gathered now. Veterans, families, strangers. Some stood in silence, some saluted, a few wiped their eyes. Collins stopped at the edge of the curb, eyes locked on the monument. He didn't move for a moment. Then, with great care, he set the to-go box down at the base of the memorial, the pie his wife used to love, the one they used to share every year at that same table. He opened it, placed a small plastic fork next to it, and whispered something only the stone would hear. Behind him, the governor removed his jacket and draped it over Collins's shoulders without a word, not to offer warmth, but to honor presence. A photographer nearby caught the image just as it happened. An old veteran with a governor's jacket over his shoulders, standing at attention beside a war memorial, a single slice of cherry pie resting like an offering to the ghosts. That photo would go viral within hours. But Captain Collins didn't care about that. He was already walking away, slow and steady, into the gold light of day. And this time, no one dared look through him.